The war had lasted for 300 years. Nobody remembered how it started anymore. The Velen Confederacy and the Drath Empire had been killing each other for so long that peace seemed like a dream from another time. Admiral Una stood on the bridge of her flagship and watched her fleet burn. The Battle of Sector 9 had been a disaster. Out of 200 ships, only 43 remained. Most of them were damaged. Some were barely holding together. "Admiral, the Drath are pulling back," said her second-in-command, Priluk. He was a tall insectoid creature with 4 arms and large compound eyes that reflected the orange glow of distant explosions. "They are not pulling back," Una replied. Her voice was tired. "They are regrouping. They will finish us within the hour." Priluk said nothing. He knew she was right. The Drath always finished what they started. That was why they were winning the war. That was why they had conquered 67 species in the last 100 years alone. Una walked to the observation window. Outside, the wreckage of her fleet drifted in the cold darkness of space. She could see escape pods floating among the debris. Some were intact. Most were not. "How many did we lose today?" she asked. 42,000 soldiers. 18 capital ships. The entire 3rd Defense Wing. Una closed her eyes. 42,000 lives. Gone in a matter of hours. And for what? They had not even slowed the Drath advance. "The Confederacy cannot survive another year of this," she said quietly. "We are running out of ships. Running out of soldiers. Running out of hope." Priluk moved closer to her. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Admiral, there may be another option. I have been studying the ancient archives. The records from before the war." Una turned to look at him. "What did you find?" "Rumors. Old stories from traders and explorers who traveled to the far edges of the galaxy." Priluk pulled up a holographic display. It showed a map of the galaxy with a small yellow dot in a distant arm. "There are records of a species that lives here. A species called humans." Una stared at the dot. It was so far from the war, so far from everything. "I have never heard of them. Nobody has. Not for centuries. The stories say they discovered faster than light travel long ago, but chose not to use it. They stayed on their home planet. They isolated themselves from the rest of the galaxy. Why would any species do that?" Priluk hesitated. "The records are unclear. Some say they were afraid of what they might become if they expanded into space. Others say they were too busy fighting each other to look outward. But there is one story that appears again and again. Tell me." "They say humans are survivors. They say humans went through something called a nuclear age, a time when they almost destroyed themselves completely. But they did not. They survived. They rebuilt. And then they looked at the stars and decided they were not ready." Una made a sound of disbelief. "A species that chose not to conquer? That chose isolation? This sounds like a fairy tale, Priluk." "Perhaps. But the old traders who told these stories were not known for imagination. They were known for finding new markets, new resources, new opportunities. If they spoke of humans, it was because they believed humans existed." Una looked at the holographic map again. The yellow dots seemed to glow brighter in the darkness of the bridge. "Even if they exist," she said, "why would they help us? They have stayed hidden for centuries. Why would they join a war that has nothing to do with them?" Priluk's compound eye shifted. "I do not know. But the stories also say something else about humans. They say humans do not know how to give up. They say humans will fight until their last breath, even when all hope is gone. They say humans are the most stubborn creatures in the galaxy." Una almost laughed. "Almost. Stubborn? We need weapons, Priluk. We need ships and soldiers. Stubbornness will not save us." "With respect, Admiral," Stubbornness has kept the Confederacy alive for 300 years. Perhaps stubbornness is exactly what we need. The bridge was silent. Outside, another Velen ship exploded in a ball of white fire. Its crew had no time to escape. One moment they were alive. The next moment they were dust. Nuna made her decision. "Prepare a scout ship," she said. "Find our fastest pilot. Someone who can avoid Drath patrols, someone who can travel to the far reaches of the galaxy without being detected." Prillik's eyes widened. "Admiral, you cannot be serious. It is a journey of several months. We may not survive that long. Then, we must hope the pilot is fast." Yuna turned away from the window. "We have tried everything else, Prillik. We have fought with honor. We have fought with strategy. We have fought with every weapon we have. And we are still losing." She walked toward the command console. Her movements were slow but determined. "Send the scout ship to this planet. To these humans. Tell them what is happening. Tell them the galaxy is dying. Tell them the Drath will not stop until every free species is enslaved or destroyed. And if they refuse to help..." Yuna paused. She thought about the 42,000 soldiers who had died that day. She thought about the billions who had died in the centuries before. She thought about the children who would never be born because their parents had been turned to ash by Drath weapons. "Then we will die alone," she said. "But at least we will die knowing we tried everything, even believing in old rumors." The scout ship launched 3 hours later. It carried a single pilot and a message that would change the history of the galaxy. It flew toward a small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. It flew toward Earth, and it flew toward the humans, who had been forgotten by everyone except the old stories. Lieutenant Taiwu was drinking his third cup of coffee when the alarm started screaming. He spilled the hot liquid all over his console and cursed loudly. The Lunar Defense Station was supposed to be a quiet posting. Nothing ever happened here. That was why he had requested the assignment. "What is going on?" He shouted at the technician across the room. "Unknown vessel, sir. It just appeared out of nowhere. It is not matching any known signature in our database." Taiwu wiped coffee from his screen and stared at the radar display. There it was. A single dot moving slowly toward Earth. The computer had marked it with a red circle, which meant it could not identify what it was. How did it get past our outer sensors? "I do not know, sir. It is like it came from outside our detection range." Way outside. Taiwu felt a cold feeling in his stomach. Humanity had been watching the stars for centuries. They had found nothing. No signals, no ships, no signs of intelligent life. They had started to believe they were alone in the universe. The dot on his screen said otherwise. "Contact Earth Command," Taiwu said. "Tell them we have a situation." 4 hours later, the alien ship entered orbit around the moon. It was damaged badly. Parts of its hull were missing. Strange fluids leaked from cracks in its surface. Whatever had happened to this ship, it had been violent. Captain Ga arrived at the station with a team of specialists. She was a tall woman with sharp eyes and a calm voice. Nothing seemed to surprise her. Not even this. "Has it tried to communicate?" she asked Taiwu. "Yes, sir. It has been broadcasting something on repeat. Our translation programs cannot make sense of it yet. The language is completely unknown." Gio nodded. She looked at the ship through the observation window. It was ugly by human standards. All angles and strange shapes, like someone had built it from spare parts without any plan. "It came a long way," she said quietly. "Whatever it wants to tell us, it must be important." The translation took 12 more hours. The brightest minds on Earth worked together to crack the alien language. When they finally succeeded, Ga was the first to read the message. She read it 3 times to make sure she understood. Then she ordered her team to prepare a shuttle. She was going to meet the alien face to face. The creature that came out of the damaged ship was not what GA expected. It was tall, taller than any human, with 4 arms and a hard shell covering most of its body. Its eyes were large and made of many smaller parts, like the eyes of an insect that had introduced itself as Pralik. "I have traveled very far," Pralik said through the translator device. "I was not sure your species still existed. Many believed humans were just old stories." GA kept her voice steady. "We exist. We have existed for a long time. We simply chose not to make ourselves known. Why?" It was a simple question with a complicated answer. GA thought about the nuclear wars that had almost ended humanity. She thought about the climate disasters that followed. She thought about the centuries of rebuilding, of learning, of growing up as a species. "We were not ready," she said finally. "We needed time to become better than we were." Pralik made a sound that might have been understanding or sadness. It was hard to tell. "I wish we had that luxury," he said. "But we do not. We are dying. My people, the Vulon, have been fighting a war for 300 years. We are losing. The Drath Empire is destroying everything in its path. Species that took millions of years to evolve are being wiped out in days." GA listened as Pralik explained everything. The war, the conquests, the billions of lives already lost, the hopelessness that had driven his admiral to send him to Earth based on nothing but ancient rumors. "Why us?" GA asked. "Why do you think humans can help?" Pralik's many eyes looked at her with something like desperation. "The old stories say things about your kind. They say you are survivors. They say you endure when others would break. They say you do not know the meaning of surrender." GA was quiet for a long moment. She thought about her grandmother, who had survived the Great Famine. She thought about her father, who had helped rebuild Seoul after the floods. She thought about all the times humanity had faced extinction and refused to die. "The stories might be true," she said, "but that does not mean we want to fight someone else's war." "I understand." Pralik lowered his head. "But I must tell you something else. The Drath do not stop. They do not make peace. They do not leave survivors. When they finish with us, they will keep expanding. They will keep conquering. Eventually, they will find Earth. And when they do, you will face them alone." The words hung in the air between them. GA looked at the damaged alien ship. She looked at the desperate creature in front of her. She thought about all the choices humanity had made to stay hidden, to stay safe, to stay out of the galaxy's problems. Maybe they had been wise choices. Or maybe they had just been scared choices. "I cannot make this decision alone," she said. "I need to speak with my leaders. I need to speak with all of humanity. I understand. But please, be quick. Every day you wait, more worlds fall. More species disappear forever." Gia nodded. She turned to look at Earth through the window. The blue planet hung in the darkness like a jewel. It was beautiful. It was peaceful. It was everything the galaxy apparently was not. "We will give you our answer soon," she said. "One way or another, humanity will decide what kind of species we want to be." She hoped they would make the right choice. She hoped they would remember what it meant to be human. And deep in her heart, she already knew what that choice would be. The emergency meeting lasted for 72 hours. Leaders from every nation on Earth gathered in the World Council chamber. They argued. They shouted. They accused each other of cowardice and recklessness. But mostly, they were afraid. General Myren sat in the military section and watched the chaos unfold. She had seen many debates in her career, but nothing like this. This was not about borders or resources or political power. This was about the future of the entire human race. "We cannot risk our people for strangers," the European representative was saying. We have spent centuries building peace on Earth. Why should we throw that away for a war we did not start? Because the war will come to us eventually, the African representative replied. You heard what the aliens said. The Drath do not stop. They do not negotiate. If we wait, we will face them alone and unprepared. How do we know the aliens telling the truth? This could be a trick, a way to manipulate us into weakening ourselves. The arguments went around and around in circles. Moran listened to all of them. She understood the fear. She felt it herself. But she also understood something else. Something that many of the politicians seemed to have forgotten. When the room finally fell silent, she stood up. May I speak? She asked. The council leader nodded. General Moran has the floor. Moran walked to the center of the chamber. Every eye in the room followed her. She was not a politician. She did not know how to give pretty speeches. She only knew how to tell the truth. I have been a soldier for 35 years, she began. I have fought in 3 conflicts. I have lost friends, colleagues, and soldiers under my command. I know what war costs. I know what it takes from us. She paused. The room was completely silent. But I also know what happens when we do nothing. I know what happens when we pretend that problems will go away if we ignore them. I know what happens when we let fear make our decisions for us. She turned to face the representatives directly. For 2 centuries, humanity has looked at the stars and wondered if we were alone. Now we know the answer. We are not alone. And everything out there is being conquered or destroyed by an empire that does not care about peace, does not care about freedom, and does not care about life. Moran pulled up a holographic display. It showed a map of the galaxy, with the Drath Empire highlighted in red. The red area covered almost half of the known space. This is how much territory the Drath control. This is how many species they have enslaved or killed. And they are still growing. Every year, they take more. Every year, more civilizations disappear. She pointed to a tiny blue dot at the edge of the map, Earth. This is us. We are small. We are isolated. We have been hiding in our little corner of the galaxy, hoping nobody would notice us. But they will notice us eventually. Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But someday, the Drath will come to Earth. And when they do, there will be no one left to help us. The European representative spoke up. So you are saying we should fight, even though we have never fought a war in space, even though we do not know our enemy, even though we could lose everything. Moran met his eyes. I am saying we have a choice. We can fight alongside allies, alongside species who share our values and our dreams. Or we can wait and fight alone against an enemy that has 300 years of experience destroying civilizations. She let the words sink in. I know which option I prefer. The vote happened 6 hours later. It was close. Very close. But in the end, humanity chose to fight. The announcement was broadcast to every corner of Earth. People gathered around screens in their homes, in their workplaces, in the streets. They listened as the council leader explained what was happening, what they were about to do. Some people cheered. Some people cried. Many did both. Captain Jihei watched the broadcast from the lunar station, where Prilak stood beside her. The alien had not slept in days. He had been waiting for this moment with a mixture of hope and terror. Your people have decided, Jihei said. Prilak's compound eyes glistened with moisture. They have chosen to help us? They have chosen to fight. Not just for you. For everyone. For every species that the Drath wants to destroy. Prilak was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. We came to Earth expecting nothing. We came based on rumors and desperate hope. And you have given us more than we ever imagined. GA shook her head. We have not given you anything yet. The hard part is just beginning. On Earth, the transformation had already started. Factories that had been making cars and appliances began making weapons and armor. Shipyards that had been building cargo vessels began building warships. Training centers opened across every continent, preparing soldiers for a war unlike anything humanity had ever fought. Dr. Suho, who had been studying Prillik and his ship for days, approached GA with a data chip. I have compiled everything we know about the Drath, he said. Their weapons, their tactics, their weaknesses. It is not much, but it is a start. GA took the chip. What do you think our chances are? Suho considered the question carefully. Honestly, I do not know. We are entering a war that has lasted for 300 years. We have no experience, no allies except the Velen, and no idea what we are really facing. That sounds bad. It is bad. Suho paused. But there is one thing we have that nobody else has. What is that? Suho smiled slightly. We are human. And if the old stories are true, that might be enough. GA looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, an empire was destroying everything in its path. Somewhere out there, billions of beings were dying. Somewhere out there, a war was waiting for humanity to join it. She hoped they were ready. She hoped they were everything the old rumors said they were, because if they were not, Earth would burn like all the others. Kethru's station hung in the darkness of space like a metal spider. It was massive. It was ancient. And for 3 years, it had been under Drath control. Admiral Yuna stared at it from the bridge of her new flagship. She had tried to take the station 4 times. 4 times she had failed. 4 times she had watched her ships burn and her soldiers die. But today was different. Today, she was not alone. Admiral, Prillik said from beside her. The human fleet has arrived. Yuna turned to look at the sensor display. 50 ships had just dropped out of faster-than-light travel. They were arranged in a perfect formation, moving as one unit. They were smaller than Velen ships, rougher looking, covered in thick armor plates that seemed almost primitive. But there was something about them. Something that made Yuna feel a strange emotion she had, almost forgotten. Hope. Commander Do Yoon's voice came through the communication system. It was calm and steady, like a man discussing the weather instead of preparing for battle. Admiral Yuna, this is the human fleet. We are ready to begin the assault on your command. Yuna activated her response channel. Commander Do-yen, the Drath have 300 warships guarding the station. They have defensive platforms, fighter squadrons, and energy shields that have stopped every attack we have launched. Are you certain your people are prepared for this? There was a pause. Then Do-yoon spoke again. Admiral, my people have been preparing for war since the first human picked up a rock and threw it at another human. We are ready. The battle began. The human ships moved differently than Velen ships. They did not advance in careful lines. They did not follow predictable patterns. They scattered like insects, weaving between enemy fire, appearing where they were least expected. Do-hyun had divided his fleet into 3 groups. The first group attacked the left side of the Drath formation. When the Drath moved to respond, the second group struck from above. When the Drath adjusted again, the third group punched through the center like a knife through paper. What are they doing? Yuna asked, watching the battle unfold on her display. Captain GA stood beside her on the bridge. She had been assigned as a liaison between the human and Velen forces. Her eyes never left the screen. They are confusing the enemy, she explained. The Drath are used to fighting species who attack directly, who follow logical patterns. Humans do not fight that way. How do humans fight? GA smiled slightly. However we need to. The Drath were not prepared for this. Their commanders gave orders that made perfect sense against normal enemies. But humans were not normal enemies. Every time the Drath thought they understood what was happening, the humans changed tactics. A human carrier named the Soul got hit by 3 Drath missiles. Its engines failed. Its weapons went offline. By any normal standard, it should have surrendered. It did not surrender. The crew of the Soul sealed themselves in emergency suits. They vented their own atmosphere to stop the fires spreading through the ship. Then, using nothing but backup power and manual controls, they turned their dying vessel toward the nearest Drath battleship. "They are going to ram them," Una said in disbelief. "They are going to sacrifice themselves." "No," Ga said quietly. "They are buying time." Una looked at the tactical display. She saw what Ga meant. The Drath battleship was forced to focus on the incoming carrier. It had to turn its weapons away from the rest of the battle. For 3 precious minutes, it could not fire on anyone else. In those 3 minutes, 2 Velen evacuation shuttles escaped from the station. 400 civilians who would have died were now safe. The Soul crashed into the Drath battleship. Both vessels exploded in a ball of white fire. The human crew had known they would die. They had known from the moment they chose to fight instead of surrender. They had done it anyway, because that was what humans did. The battle lasted for 11 hours. 11 hours of chaos and fire and death. 11 hours of humans doing impossible things because they did not know they were impossible. When it was finally over, Kethra Station was free. Una walked through the damaged corridors of the station with Ga beside her. The walls were scorched. The floors were covered in debris. But it was theirs again. After 3 years, it was finally theirs. 31 human ships were destroyed, Una said. Thousands of your people are dead. How can you call this a victory? Ga stopped walking. She turned to face the Admiral. Because we took the station. Because we saved the civilians. Because tomorrow, 17 star systems will be free from Drath control. She paused. My people did not come here expecting to survive. They came here expecting to make a difference. And they did. Una was silent for a long moment. She had fought the Drath for decades. She had seen many species join the war and then break when they realized how hard it was. She had watched hope die in the eyes of soldiers who simply could not take any more. But the humans were different. They did not seem to know how to break. I owe you an apology, Una said finally. When your species was just a rumor, I did not believe you were real. I thought the old stories were fantasy. Ga shook her head. You do not owe us anything. We are allies now. Allies do not keep score. On the other side of the station, Commander Do-hyun sat alone in a quiet room. He had a list in his hands. Names. The names of every human who had died in the battle. He read each name slowly, silently, trying to remember the faces that went with them. A young officer named Yoonji knocked on the door. Commander, the Admiral wants to see you. There is going to be a celebration. Do-hyun did not look up. Tell her I will come soon. I am not finished here. Yoonji looked at the list in his hands. She understood. They did well, sir. They all did well. Yes. Do-hyun finally looked up. His eyes were red, but his voice was steady. They did. And tomorrow, we will do it again. And the day after that. And every day until this war is over. How long will that take? Do-hyun stood up. He folded the list carefully and put it in his pocket, close to his heart. As long as it needs to. Humans do not quit. We never have. We never will. He walked out of the room and toward the celebration. Behind him, the stars burned bright in the darkness of space. The war was far from over. But for the first time in 300 years, the Drath had learned something new. They had learned to be afraid. The news of Kethros spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. It traveled through communication networks, through whispered conversations, through the desperate hope of enslaved populations. Within days, everyone knew. The humans were real. And they had won, on a conquered world called Desser. A young alien named Vrel heard the news from an old radio hidden in his family's basement. He had grown up under Drath rule. He had never known freedom. He had always been told that resistance was pointless. But now he was standing in front of 200 other Dessarians, telling them something different. The humans came from nowhere. They had never fought in space before. They did not have advanced weapons or shields or any of the things we thought were necessary. But they won. They took Kethros Station from the Drath. An older Dessarian spoke up. One battle does not win a war. The Drath will crush them eventually. Maybe, Rel said. Or maybe the humans are everything the old stories said they were. Maybe they are the species that does not know how to give up. He looked at the faces around him. He saw fear. He saw doubt. But he also saw something else. A tiny spark of something that had been dead for a generation. Hope. The humans are fighting, Rel said. The question is, are we going to fight with them? The rebellion on Desser started that night. It was small at first. Just a few hundred people with stolen weapons and desperate courage. But it grew. And it was not alone. Across the galaxy, similar rebellions began to spark. Species that had surrendered decades ago suddenly remembered what resistance felt like. Slaves who had given up on freedom started to believe again. The Drath High Command had not felt fear in 300 years. They felt it now. General Kreth stood before the War Council in the heart of the Drath homeworld. He was ancient by Drath standards, covered in scars from a lifetime of conquest. He had personally overseen the destruction of 12 civilizations. He had never failed Dot until now. Explain to me, he said slowly, how 50 primitive ships from a forgotten species defeated 300 of our finest warships. The officer in front of him trembled. General, the humans fought unlike anything we have ever seen. They did not follow patterns. They did not retreat when they should have. When their ships were destroyed, their crews kept fighting from the wreckage. They did not behave like normal enemies. Then what did they behave like? Another officer spoke up, an older female who had spent her career studying enemy species. They behave like survivors, General. Not predators, not prey. Something different. Explain. Predators fight for dominance. They want to win and then enjoy the victory. Prey fights to escape. They want to survive and then hide. But survivors... She paused, choosing her words carefully. Survivors fight because they have already accepted death. They have nothing left to lose. They cannot be intimidated because they have faced worse. They cannot be broken because they have already been broken and rebuilt themselves. General Kreth was silent for a long moment. His dark eyes reflected the glow of the war displays around him. Then we must destroy them quickly, he said finally, before they inspire others. Before this disease of hope spreads further. General, our forces are already stretched thin. The rebellions across the occupied territories are growing. If we focus on the humans, we may lose control of systems we have held for decades. Then we will burn those systems to the ground. Every rebellious world will be an example. Every human ship will be hunted until none remain. The orders went out. The Drath war machine, which had been slowly advancing across the galaxy for 3 centuries, suddenly shifted its focus. For the first time, they were not just conquering. They were afraid. On Kethros Station, Commander Do-Hyun stood in the memorial hall. The wall in front of him was covered in names. The names of every human who had died in the battle. There were thousands of them. Admiral Yuna found him there, staring at the wall in silence. "Commander, you should rest. You have not slept in 3 days. Dahin did not turn around. I will rest when the war is over. Yuna moved to stand beside him. She looked at the names on the wall. She could not read human writing, but she understood what they represented. When we sent for your people, we expected warriors. We expected soldiers who would fight because we asked them to. She paused. We did not expect this. We did not expect people who would die for strangers they had never met. Dahin finally looked at her. His eyes were tired but clear. My grandmother used to tell me stories when I was young. Stories about our history. About all the times humanity almost destroyed itself and somehow survived. She told me that humans are not special because we are strong. We are special because we refuse to stay down. He turned back to the wall of names. These people knew they might die. They came anyway, not because they wanted glory or rewards, but because somewhere in the galaxy, innocent beings were suffering. And humans cannot ignore that. We never could. Yuna thought about her own people. The Velen had been fighting for 300 years. They had grown tired, hopeless, ready to accept defeat. But now something had changed. The humans had given them something more valuable than ships or weapons. They had given them a reason to believe again. The Drath are regrouping, Yuna said. Our intelligence says they are preparing a massive attack. They want to destroy the human fleet before you can grow stronger. Dahan nodded. He had expected this. Then we will be ready for them. How can you be so confident? You have seen how powerful they are. You have seen what they can do. Dahyun smiled slightly. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who understood something that others could not. For 300 years, the Drath have been winning because nobody believed they could be beaten. But we beat them at Kethros. We showed the galaxy that they can bleed, that they can lose, that they are not invincible. He placed his hand on the wall, touching the names of the fallen. The Drath think they have started a war with humanity, but they are wrong. They have started something much worse. They have given us a purpose. They have given us an enemy that deserves to be defeated. They have given us a reason to unleash everything we are. Yuna watched his face. She saw something there that she had seen in the old stories, in the ancient records. In the rumors that had brought her to Earth, she saw humanity. The war is far from over, she said quietly. No, Dahin agreed. It is just beginning. Outside the station, the stars burned in the endless darkness. Somewhere out there, the Drath were preparing their revenge. Somewhere out there, rebellions were growing stronger. Somewhere out there, a galaxy that had forgotten hope was starting to remember Dot, and in the middle of it all, humanity stood ready. The old rumors had become real. The forgotten species had entered the fight, and nothing would ever be the same again.